The warning lights flashed red across the bridge of the New Dawn. Captain Han Sol gripped the metal rail as the massive colony ship shook violently. 50,000 people were counting on him to get them safely to their new home. But everything was going wrong. "Report," Han Sol called out to his crew. Chief Engineer Dongwu looked up from his console with sweat dripping down his face. "Captain, we have major engine failures. 3 of the 4 main drives are completely dead. The 4th one is barely working." Han Sol felt his heart sink. They had traveled for 2 years through space to reach planet Kepler 442c. Earth was dying. From pollution and war, these 50,000 people were humanity's hope for survival. They could not fail now. "Can we make it to the planet's surface?" Han Sol asked. Dongwu shook his head slowly. "No, sir. The remaining engine cannot support our weight in the planet's gravity. If we try to land, we will crash and kill everyone on board." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of alarms. Han Sol looked out at the blue and green planet below them. It looked so peaceful and beautiful. It was supposed to be their new home. "What about the escape pods?" asked Lieutenant Sujin, the navigation officer. "We have them," Dongwu replied, "but there is a problem. We have escape pods for 49,999 people. We are carrying 50,000. The number hit everyone like a punch to the stomach. One person would have to stay behind." Han Sol closed his eyes. As captain, it was his duty to go down with his ship. He had known this day might come. "I will stay," he said quietly. "No, Captain," came a voice from the back of the bridge. Everyone turned to see Private Tae-min step forward. He was a young soldier from the Korean Defense Force. He had signed up to protect the colonists during their journey. "Private, return to your station," Han Sol ordered. Tae-min stood straight and tall. "Captain, with respect, you are needed to lead the people on the planet. I am just one soldier. My job was to protect these people. Let me finish my job." "Tae-min, if you stay on this ship, you will die," Han Sol said. "The ship will crash or drift into space forever." "I understand, sir." Tae-min's voice was calm and steady. "But someone has to guide the ship away from the planet. If this ship crashes into the surface, it could destroy the landing zone. The colonists would have nowhere safe to land." Dongwu looked at his readings again. "The private is right. This ship weighs millions of tons. If it crashes, it will cause massive damage. We need someone to manually steer it away from the planet." Han Sol stared at the young soldier. Tae-min was only 25 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. But his eyes showed no fear, only determination. "There has to be another way," Sujin said desperately. "There is no other way," Tae-min replied. "The escape pods are automated. They will take everyone safely to the planet's surface. But someone needs to stay with the ship's manual controls." The captain walked over to Tae-min. "Son, are you sure about this?" "Yes, sir. These people deserve a chance at a new life. I will make sure they get it." Han Sol felt tears in his eyes. This young man was willing to sacrifice everything for people he barely knew. It was the most brave thing he had ever seen. "All right," Han Sol said finally. "Begin loading the escape pods immediately. Tae-min, come with me to the manual control station." The next few hours moved like a blur. Families grabbed their few belongings and rushed to the escape pods. Children cried as the pods were sealed shut. Parents held their babies tight as the pods launched toward the planet. Tae-min helped load the pods. He comforted scared children and helped elderly people into their seats. He smiled and told them everything would be okay. He never mentioned that he would not be joining them. Finally, only one escape pod remained. Han Sol stood in front of it, with tears streaming down his face. "I should be the one staying," he said to Tae-min. "Captain, those people will need a leader when they reach the planet. You have studied the planet for years. You know how to build a colony. I am just a soldier." "You are much more than just a soldier," Han Sol replied. "You are a hero." The 2 men shook hands. Then Han Sol climbed into the last escape pod. As the pod sealed shut, he looked through the small window at Tae-min. The young soldier stood straight and gave him a salute. The escape pod launched toward the planet. Taman watched it disappear into the atmosphere far below. Now he was completely alone on the massive ship. He walked to the bridge and sat down, at the manual control station. The ship was slowly drifting toward the planet. If he did nothing, it would crash in about 6 hours. He had to steer it away. Taman activated the ship's communication system one last time. "This is Private Taman to all escape pods. I will guide the New Dawn away from your landing zone. You are safe to proceed to the planet's surface." "Captain," Hansol's voice came through the radio. "Taman, thank you. We will never forget what you have done." "Tell them I held the line," Taman replied. He turned off the radio and began working the manual controls. The ship slowly turned away from the planet. But the damaged engine could not fight the planet's gravity much longer. 3 hours later, the last engine died completely. The ship began falling toward the planet's surface. But Taman had steered it toward the northern continent. This area was covered in toxic storms and dangerous creatures. The colonists would never go there. As the ship crashed through the atmosphere, Taman strapped himself into the pilot's seat. The ship was breaking apart around him. Fire and smoke filled the bridge. He could see the ground rushing up to meet him. The last thing he remembered was the terrible sound of metal hitting rock. Then everything went black. Far away on the southern continent, the escape pods landed safely. The colonists began building their new homes under Captain Hansol's leadership. They built a monument to remember Private Taman, the soldier who gave his life so they could live. But on the northern continent, among the wreckage of the New Dawn, something moved in the smoke and fire. Taman opened his eyes and began to crawl from the ruins of his ship. His real story was just beginning. 25 years had passed since the crash. The northern continent of Kepler 44E2c was no longer the same deadly wasteland. Where once only toxic storms and hungry beasts roamed, now stood a fortress built from metal and stone. Taman crouched behind a rocky ridge, watching his prey. The creature below was massive, bigger than any earth animal. Its body was made of living crystal and metal. Sharp spines covered its back like armor. The locals called them stone hunters. They were the most dangerous predators on the continent. But Taman was no longer the same man who had crashed here 25 years ago. His body had changed. The planet's strange radiation had made him stronger and faster. His muscles were like steel cables. His reflexes were lightning quick. His mind was sharp like a blade. He wore armor made from the scales of dead monsters. His weapons were crafted from salvaged ship parts and alien metals. Around his waist hung the skulls of creatures that had tried to kill him. Each skull told a story of survival. The stone hunter lifted its massive head and sniffed the air. It could sense something was near. Its 6 eyes glowed red as it searched for danger. Taman smiled. He had learned patience from hunting these beasts. 25 years of constant battle had taught him to think like a predator. He knew this creature's habits better than it knew them itself. The stone hunter took a step toward the waterhole. This was what Taman had been waiting for. He leaped from his hiding place with inhuman speed. His spear struck the creature's neck joint, the only weak spot in its crystal armor. The stone hunter roared in pain and anger. It swung its massive claws at Taman, but he was already moving. He rolled under the creature's belly and drove his second spear into its heart. The beast crashed to the ground with a sound like thunder. Taman stood over his kill, breathing heavily. Even with his enhanced abilities, these hunts were dangerous. One mistake would mean death. He began the long process of harvesting useful parts from the creature. The crystal plates would strengthen his fortress walls. The metal bones would become new weapons. Nothing would be wasted. The wasteland had taught him that survival meant using everything. As he worked, Taman thought about his old life. Sometimes he could barely remember the young soldier who had volunteered to stay behind. That man had been weak and soft. The wasteland had burned that weakness away. His fortress was built into the side of a mountain, hidden from the worst storms. Inside, the walls were lined with weapons and armor. Maps covered every surface, showing the locations of different creatures and their hunting patterns. This had become his kingdom, and he was its only ruler. The fortress had been built from the wreckage of the New Dawn. Taemin had spent years pulling useful parts from the crashed ship. The ship's computer core still worked, giving him access to human knowledge and technology. He had used this knowledge to build things that should have been impossible. His workshop contained devices that could bend metal like clay, energy weapons that could cut through solid rock, armor that could stop the claws of any beast. He had become both warrior and inventor, shaped by necessity and isolation. Water came from underground springs he had discovered beneath the mountain. Food came from his hunts and from strange plants that grew in the toxic soil. He had learned to eat things that would poison normal humans. His body had adapted to digest alien nutrients. But the most important change was in his mind. 25 years of constant threat had turned him into a perfect fighting machine. He could predict where enemies would attack before they moved. He could track creatures across miles of rocky ground. He could fight for days without rest. The wasteland had tried to kill him in every way possible. Acid rain that could melt flesh, poisonous gas that rose from cracks in the ground, creatures with venom that could stop a heart. Each challenge had made him stronger. At night, when the storms were too dangerous to hunt, Taemin would study the recordings he had made. Over the years, he had mapped every dangerous area on the continent. He knew which creatures hunted during the day and which came out at night. He knew where the poisonous plants grew and where the safe water could be found. His greatest achievement was the buffer zone he had created around his fortress. For 50 miles in every direction, he had eliminated the most dangerous predators. The smaller creatures had learned to fear his scent. Even the stone hunters avoided this area now. But Taemin was not the only intelligent life on this continent. Deep in the mountain caves lived an ancient race called the Valdris. They were tall humanoid beings with gray skin and 4 arms. They had been watching him for years. The Valdris were warriors by nature. They respected strength above all else. For decades they had ruled this continent through fear and violence. No creature dared challenge them. But then this strange human had arrived. At first they had expected him to die quickly like all other soft-skinned creatures. Instead he had grown stronger. He had claimed territory that even the Valdris avoided. He had killed beasts that they considered too dangerous to hunt. Elder Korthan was the leader of the Valdris. He was ancient even by their standards, having lived for over 300 years. He had watched civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, but he had never seen anything like this human. He fights like one of us, Korthan told his warriors, but he thinks like something else, something new. The other Valdris were not sure what to make of Taemin. Some wanted to challenge him to combat. Others thought they should leave him alone, but all of them respected what he had accomplished. Korthan had made his decision. Tomorrow, he would approach this human warrior, not as an enemy, but as one warrior greeting another. He sensed that great changes were coming to their world. This human might be the key to surviving what was ahead. As night fell over the wasteland, Taemin returned to his fortress. He did not know that eyes were watching him from the shadows. He did not know that his years of isolation were about to end. But somewhere deep in his warrior's heart, he felt that change was coming. The man who had been left to die was ready for whatever came next. The morning sun cast long shadows across the wasteland as Taemin prepared his weapons. Something felt different today. His enhanced senses told him that he was being watched. After 25 years of solitude, he knew when he was no longer alone. 4 figures emerged from behind the rocky outcrops. They moved with the fluid grace of natural predators. Taemin had never seen beings like these before, but he recognized their warrior bearing immediately. The Valdris stood 8 feet tall with gray skin that looked like polished stone. Each had 4 powerful arms ending in clawed hands. Their eyes glowed with ancient wisdom. The leader stepped forward, his movement slow and deliberate. "Human warrior," the leader spoke in accented but clear human language. "I am Korthan, elder of the mountain clans. We have watched you for many seasons." Taemin kept his weapons ready but did not attack. These beings showed respect in their posture. They had come to talk, not to fight. "You have done what we thought impossible," Korthan continued. "You have tamed the northern wastes. You have killed the stone hunters that even we avoided. You fight like a true warrior." "What do you want?" Taemin asked. His voice was rough from years of silence. "To understand you, and perhaps to offer you something greater than hunting beasts in this wasteland." Korthan gestured for his warriors to lower their weapons. "Come with us, human. There are things you must see. Truths about this world and the galaxy beyond." Something in the elder's voice convinced Taemin to follow. He had spent 25 years learning to read the intentions of dangerous creatures. These Valdris were dangerous, but they were not his enemies. They traveled deeper into the mountains than Taemin had ever gone. The Valdris moved through hidden passages carved into the rock itself. Ancient symbols covered the walls, telling stories of battles fought across the stars. The passage opened into a vast underground city. Towers of black stone reached toward the cavern ceiling. Thousands of Valdris moved through the streets below, but something was wrong. Taemin could see it in their faces. These were a people living in fear. "Welcome to Valdris Prime," Korthan said sadly. "The last free city of our people." They entered a great hall filled with holographic displays showing star maps and battle reports. The images told a terrible story. Planet after planet marked in red. Entire solar systems gone dark. A cancer spreading across the galaxy. "What am I looking at?" Taemin asked. "The Ravagers," Korthan replied. "They are not truly alive, but they consume life itself. They turn entire worlds into dead husks. They have been spreading across the galaxy for over 1,000 years." The holographic display zoomed in on a writhing mass of black tentacles and mechanical parts. The Ravagers looked like a nightmare fusion of machine and diseased flesh. They moved like a plague, consuming everything in their path. "Our homeworld was the first to fall," Korthan continued. "We have been fighting them ever since, but we are losing. World after world falls to their hunger. Soon, even this refuge will not be safe." Taemin studied the tactical displays. His enhanced mind quickly grasped the scope of the threat. "How many worlds have they taken?" "Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. They reproduce by consuming organic matter and turning it into more of themselves. Every world they devour makes them stronger. And you brought me here because—" Korthan turned to face him directly. "Because in 25 years of watching you, we have seen something we have not seen in centuries. Hope." The elder activated another display. This one showed recordings of Taemin's hunts over the years. But the focus was not on his kills, it was on his tactics. "Look at how you hunt," Korthan explained. "You do not rely on strength alone. You use the environment. You set traps. You turn the creature's own instincts against them. This is how the Ravagers must be fought." Taemin watched himself on the displays. He saw patterns he had not consciously recognized. His hunting style had evolved into something unique. He combined human military tactics with alien cunning and predator instincts. "The Valdris are mighty warriors," Korthan admitted, "but we think like warriors. We meet our enemies in direct combat. The Ravagers are too numerous for such tactics. We need a different way of fighting. You want me to teach your people to fight like humans?" "We want you to teach us to fight like you. You are no longer fully human, Taemin of Earth. You have become something new, something that might be able to stop the Ravagers." Over the following days, Taemin learned the full scope of the Ravager threat. They had consumed entire civilizations. Billions of beings had died screaming as they were absorbed into the collective mass. The few surviving races had been fighting a desperate retreat for generations. But as Taemin studied their tactics, he began to see weaknesses. The Ravagers were like a swarm of insects. They were individually weak, but overwhelmingly numerous. They relied on consuming their enemies to grow stronger, but that also made them predictable. "They have to feed constantly," Taemin explained to a gathering of Valdris war leaders. "That means they always move toward the largest source of organic matter. We can use that against them." He began teaching them human concepts of asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run tactics, guerrilla fighting, using small forces to defeat larger ones. The Valdris were eager students. Their warrior culture made them quick to adapt new fighting techniques. Taemin also shared human technology adapted with alien materials, energy weapons that could disrupt Ravager communication networks, armor that could resist their acidic attacks, traps that used their feeding instincts to destroy them. But the real breakthrough came when Taemin suggested something that shocked the Valdris leadership. "We stop running," he said simply. "We start hunting them." "Impossible," one war leader protested. "They outnumber us 1,000,000 to 1. "Numbers do not matter if you choose the right battlefield," Taemin replied. "I have spent 25 years learning how to kill things that should be able to kill me. The secret is not to fight their strengths, you fight their weaknesses." Under Taemin's leadership, the Valdris began their first offensive operations in centuries. Small strike teams hit Ravager supply lines, communication nodes were destroyed, feeding grounds were poisoned. For the first time in generations, the Ravagers were forced to react instead of attack. News of these victories spread to other surviving races across the galaxy. Refugees who had given up hope began to believe again. Scattered resistance groups started coordinating their efforts. The tide was slowly beginning to turn. Corthan watched Taemin planning their next operation and shook his head in amazement. The warriors of old spoke of gods of war who could turn defeat into victory. "I thought they were just stories." "I am not a god," Taemin replied. "I am just a soldier who learned how to survive." But as word of the human warrior spread across the galaxy, others began to see him differently. To the desperate and dying civilizations, he had become something more than human. He had become their salvation. The abandoned soldier was becoming a legend. And legends, Taemin was learning, had power all their own. Dr. Nari stared at the communication device she had spent 5 years building. The machine hummed quietly in her laboratory on the southern continent of Kepler 442c. After 25 years of silence, she was finally ready to contact Earth. The human colony had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. What started as 50,000 desperate refugees had become a thriving civilization of over 200,000 people. Cities sprawled across the fertile southern lands. Farms fed millions. Children who had never seen Earth called this world home. Nari had been just a child when the escape pods landed. Her father had been the colony's first botanist. Now she was the chief scientist, following in his footsteps but reaching far beyond what he had ever imagined possible. "Are you ready?" asked Jinho, who stood beside her in the laboratory. He had been a scared 10-year-old boy during the landing. Now he was the elected leader of the colonial government, a man who carried the hopes of their entire world on his shoulders. "As ready as I can be," Nari replied. "We have no idea what we will find. Earth might not even exist anymore." She activated the faster-than-light communication array. The device used principles of quantum entanglement that human science was only beginning to understand. It had taken her years to figure out how to make it work with their limited resources. The machine crackled to life. Static filled the room as the signal surged across the vastness of space. Then, miraculously, a voice came through the speakers. "This is Earth Defense Command. Who is this? How are you using military encryption codes?" Nari's hands shook as she responded. "This is Dr. Nari of the Kepler 442c colony. We are the survivors from the New Dawn colony ship. We launched from Earth 27 years ago." Silence filled the channel for long seconds. Then came a different voice, older and filled with emotion. "Nari, this is Admiral Park from Earth Defense. We thought you were all dead." The New Dawn was reported lost with all hands. "We made it, Admiral. 50,000 of us survived. We built a new civilization here." "Thank God," the Admiral whispered. "Nari, I have to tell you something terrible. Earth is under attack. We are losing the..." The words hit Nari like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "Alien invaders called the Ravagers arrived 3 months ago. They have already consumed Mars and the outer colonies. Billions are dead. We estimate we have maybe 6 months before Earth falls completely." Jinho grabbed the microphone. "Admiral, this is Administrator Jinho. What do you need from us?" "We need everything you can give us. Ships, weapons, soldiers. But honestly, I do not think it will be enough. These creatures are unlike anything we have ever faced. They turn our own dead against us. Nari felt tears streaming down her face. Earth, their home, was dying while they lived in safety on this distant world. But then she remembered something. Admiral, there is someone you need to know about. A man named Taemin. He stayed behind when we evacuated the New Dawn. We thought he died in the crash. I remember that name from the old records. Private Taemin, Korean Defense Force. What about him? We think he might still be alive. On the northern continent. We need to check before we can help you. I understand. But please hurry. We do not have much time. The communication ended, leaving Nari and Jin-Ho staring at each other in shock. Their peaceful world had suddenly become connected to a galaxy, at war. Jin-Ho called an emergency meeting of the Colonial Council. The news spread quickly through the colony. Earth was under attack. Their homeworld needed help. But first they had to know what had happened to the man who had saved them all. Major Sung-Ho volunteered to lead the expedition to the northern continent. He was a career military officer who had been training the Colonial Defense Forces. If Taemin was somehow still alive, Sung-Ho would find him. The northern continent is a death trap, Jin-Ho warned him. Toxic storms, poisonous creatures, radiation that can kill you in hours. We declared it off limits for good reason. I understand the risks, sir. But if Private Taemin is alive, he has been surviving there for 25 years. That makes him the toughest human being who ever lived. We need someone like that if we are going to help Earth. Sung-Ho assembled a team of 20 volunteers. They took the colony's best aircraft and most advanced equipment. The flight to the northern continent took 6 hours across empty ocean and barren islands. As they approached the northern landmass, Sung-Ho was shocked by what he saw. The continent had been completely transformed. Where the old surveys showed nothing but wasteland, he now saw massive structures built into the mountainsides. Metal and stone fortifications covered the landscape like the work of some ancient civilization. "Sir, are you seeing this?" asked his pilot. "These structures are not on any of our maps." "I see them. Take us down carefully. We do not know what we are walking into." They landed near what appeared to be the largest structure, a fortress built into the side of a mountain. As the team approached on foot, Sung-Ho noticed something that made his blood run cold. The ground around the fortress was covered with the bones of massive creatures, skulls larger than vehicles, rib cages that could house a small building. "What kind of animals were these?" whispered one of his soldiers. "I do not know, but something killed them all." Movement caught Sung-Ho's eye. A figure emerged from the fortress, walking toward them with calm confidence. The man was tall and lean, covered in armor made from scales and metal. Scars covered his visible skin like a map of countless battles. His eyes held a depth that spoke of decades of hardship. But Sung-Ho recognized the face beneath the scars. It was older, harder, changed by time and struggle. But it was unmistakably the same face from the old colony records. "Private Taemin?" Sung-Ho called out. The figure stopped and studied them for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, but unmistakably human. "I have not been called by that name in many years. Who are you?" "Major Sung-Ho, Kepler Colony Defense Force. We came looking for you." "Looking for me? Why?" Sung-Ho took a deep breath. "Because Earth is under attack, and we think you might be the only one who can help save it." Taemin was silent for a long time, staring at these visitors from his past. Finally, he nodded toward his fortress. "Come inside, we have much to discuss." As they entered the massive structure, Sung-Ho realized they were not just looking at a survivor. They were looking at someone who had become something far more than human. The abandoned soldier had become a legend, and Earth needed legends now more than ever. Inside the fortress, Major Sung-Ho and his team stared in amazement. The walls were covered with weapons that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Maps showed detailed battle plans against creatures they had never seen. Most shocking of all were the alien warriors standing alongside Taemin. "These are my allies," Taemin explained, gesturing to the tall gray-skinned beings. "The Valdris. We have been fighting the Ravagers for 3 years now." Ravagers? Sung-Ho asked. The same creatures attacking Earth? Yes, they consume entire worlds. Earth is just their latest target. Taemin's scarred face was grim. How long does Earth have? Maybe 6 months. Our defenses are failing. Billions are already dead. Taemin closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they burned with determination. Then we leave immediately. Korthan, send word to all Valdris clans. We march to war. The ancient Valdris elder stepped forward. The fleet will be ready in 3 days, war leader. Sung-Ho was confused. War leader? Fleet? Taemin led them to a massive window overlooking a hidden valley. Below them stretched the largest military force Sung-Ho had ever seen. Thousands of Valdris warriors trained with human-designed weapons. Strange aircraft filled the sky. Massive warships sat ready for launch. 25 years ago, you left me to die on a dead world, Taemin said quietly. I used that time to build an army. The preparation took exactly 3 days. Ships from across the galaxy arrived to join Taemin's force. Survivors from dozens of worlds that had been attacked by the Ravagers. They had heard the stories of the human who had turned the tide against the endless swarm. Nari and Jinho arrived from the colony with every ship they could spare. When they saw Taemin for the first time, they barely recognized him. The young soldier they remembered had become something legendary. Taemin? Nari whispered. Is it really you? He turned to look at her. For just a moment, she saw a flash of the young man who had volunteered to stay behind all those years ago, but it was buried beneath decades of war and survival. Hello, Nari. You have grown up. We thought you were dead. We built a monument for you. I was dead. This world killed the man I used to be. What stands before you now is what grew from his ashes. The reunion was brief. There was no time for long conversations or explanations. Earth was dying, and every moment counted. The combined fleet was the largest armada in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside Valdris cruisers. Refugee vessels from 100 worlds joined the formation. At the center of it all was Taemin's flagship, built from the remains of his fortress and equipped with weapons that defied understanding. The journey to Earth took 2 weeks at maximum speed. During the trip, Taemin shared his knowledge of Ravager tactics with the human commanders. He had spent years learning their weaknesses. Now he would use that knowledge to save his species. They think like a virus, he explained to the assembled officers. They consume and spread. But they are predictable. They always go for the largest source of organic matter first. We can use that against them. When the fleet arrived at Earth, the sight that greeted them was horrifying. The beautiful blue world was covered in black veins. Ravager ships swarmed like insects around the dying planet. The moon had been partially consumed, leaving it looking like a half-eaten apple. My God, whispered Admiral Park over the communication channel. Taemin, is that really you? It is me, Admiral. And I brought friends. The battle for Earth began immediately. The Ravagers threw everything they had at the new arrivals. Millions of their ships rose from the planet's surface like a dark cloud. But Taemin had been preparing for this moment for 3 years. All ships execute Plan Omega, Taemin commanded. The Allied fleet split into dozens of smaller groups. Instead of meeting the Ravagers head-on, they used hit-and-run tactics. Human ingenuity combined with alien technology created weapons into the core. Ravagers had never seen before. Valdris warriors boarded Ravager ships and fought them in close combat. Human pilots used their superior tactics to outmaneuver the swarm. Refugee ships carrying survivors from destroyed worlds finally had their chance for revenge. But the real genius of Taemin's plan became clear when the Ravagers tried to retreat to their main hive ship. He had been counting on their predictable behavior. Every route they could take had been booby-trapped. Every escape path led to an ambush. Now we end this, Taemin said, as his flagship approached the massive Ravager mothership. The creature was the size of a small moon, pulsing with diseased life. It was the heart of the entire swarm. The final assault was brutal. Taemin led a team of volunteers into the heart of the beast. Inside the mothership, They fought through corridors made of living flesh and metal. The air was thick with poison that would kill normal humans in seconds. But Taemin's enhanced body shrugged off toxins that had no effect on him anymore. At the center of the ship, they found the Ravager Queen. She was ancient beyond measure, her body a twisted fusion of organic matter and machinery. When she spoke, her voice was like the sound of dying worlds. "You cannot stop us, little human. We have consumed 1,000 civilizations. Your species will join them." "You are wrong," Taemin replied, raising his weapon. "You picked the wrong species to hunt." The battle with the Queen lasted hours. She was incredibly powerful, able to regenerate from almost any wound. But Taemin had learned patience from 25 years of hunting dangerous prey. He waited for his moment, then struck with surgical precision at her only weakness. When the Queen died, her death scream echoed across the galaxy. Every Ravager ship suddenly stopped moving. The hive mind that controlled them had been destroyed. Across Earth's orbit, millions of enemy vessels began falling toward the planet like dead insects. Earth was saved, but the cost had been enormous. Billions were still dead. Entire cities had been consumed. It would take generations to rebuild what had been lost. As Taemin stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the world he had saved, he felt no triumph. Only a deep sadness for all that had been lost. "You did it," Nari said, joining him at the window. "You saved us all." "I saved what was left," he replied. "The Earth I knew is gone forever. But humanity survives, and we will remember the soldier who gave everything to protect us." Taemin nodded slowly. He had been abandoned on a dead world 25 years ago, but instead of dying, he had become something greater. The young private who had volunteered to stay behind had returned as a legend, a god of war who had turned humanity's darkest hour into their greatest victory. The boy who was left to die had come home to save them all.